I'm Shobha Jayakumar, studying for medical degree in USM Kubang Krian.
I'm Sharbina and I'm actually lecturing part-time in Cyberjaya Medical University.
My name is Dr. Raj. I currently work in a general outpatient practice and I opened my own clinic which is in Ipoh, which is called Clinic Tin City.
It is a challenging part studying in medical school, I wouldn't say no. When I entered medical school, everyone gave me this fear that medical school is going to be tough, it's going to be very difficult and people will end up in stress. But it's totally all myth because as for me, medical school wasn't that hard if I say now. Initially when I entered medical school, the first semester when I was in there, I really found it very difficult to understand the method of studying over there, all the subjects and everything. You know, you're very new to an environment, being away from home and getting adapted to a new situation was very tough. As day passed, I got a hold of it. I understood how to study there. But soon I'll be entering for my clinical years, which is in October. So that is exactly where the actual challenging part is going to begin, because I will start attending patients, I'll be going for on-calls at midnight, and have to have my own patient, I have to follow up my own patient, come up with my own diagnosis with the assistance of my lecturers. So that's where exactly the challenging part of medical school will begin. Frankly, I would say I have no regrets because I love the way medical school works. I like to be a doctor. I like the part where we save lives, although it is challenging, because when I like the career, the most difficult thing also becomes very interesting and easy to understand because all of my interests.
I'm actually not an expert, I'm just a general practitioner. So yes, I have been practicing since 2009, and ever since I've been working as a general practitioner in a clinic. And just recently, a few months back, I got an opportunity to lecture part-time. So I'm pursuing both currently. Well, prior to becoming a lecturer, I was actually teaching IGCSE biology syllabus in a private school. So that actually got me motivated.
When you do medicine, you can either be in an inpatient or outpatient setting. I have been more interested to be in an outpatient setting because it's generally, what interests me more in the field is that we work more on the wellness of people. We treat people who are not so sick, but we get them to feel more well than they are. This is just personal interest, and I personally am interested in that, so I chose to be in general practice.
Actually, it's not, because it's based on your own time management. Because if you can balance it between your studies and extracurricular activities, you can perform well in both. Believe it or not, in my personal campus in Kubang Krian, there are so many future doctors who are very active athletes. There's even this game called MIBG, where it's like medical intervarsity games meant for all these future doctors, all these medical campus students to get involved in games. So that's a well-known proof that doctors can be also athletes or active in extracurricular activities. I personally, I'm not an athlete, I'm not active in sports, but I love indulging in extracurricular activities like dance and extra society works. So all these extracurricular activities is not a barrier for me to get involved in just because I'm in med school. Yes, maybe 1 or 2 out of like 10-15 people, they probably are being forced by their parents. But no, I wasn't forced by my family, friends, or nobody. Nobody forced me, but they encouraged me to become a medical school student.
So basically, from my experience, lecture alone is definitely not sufficient. We will definitely need to do more than that. A lot of research, then you have to keep abreast with the current information, current findings. For example, like you see this coronavirus that just came in, right? So it has given us a great insight about this whole medical world and the simple steps that we usually take for granted. For example, like washing hands, wearing a mask, even when we have cold or we, tend to sneeze and cough in the public. So this has given us a great insight. So if you ask me, lecture alone will never mold you into a complete healthcare professional. Besides lecturing, you need to get down to the public. You need to do a lot of social service that is related to healthcare. Volunteer yourself in any clinics. Read up, explore. Even traveling, I would say, it's a great way for us to improve ourselves. I left medical school somewhere in 2009, right? So I can only comment what I saw when I was studying. Everybody was passionate enough, okay? But I would say that most of the doctors who are lecturing or who were lecturing were also practicing in the hospital and the clinic. So basically, they're very tied up, very occupied. So despite all that, they still managed to come spend some time with us. Yes, to get them after the lectures was definitely a problem. But during lectures, they're very much passionate, they're involved. But the only thing, they have very limited time with us. So I don't really agree with that. But I'm not sure now, how is it? But I guess medicine is a very beautiful art. So anyone who's teaching it has volunteered to come forward to teach that, will not take teaching for granted, I suppose. Well, I would say it's not about guaranteeing a spot, because if you look at the system in Malaysia, for you to garner a place in a medical school, you will need to have a good academic background. Secondly, it's how committed you are, your motivational level, because throughout this whole medical school journey, there will be many parts in your journey that you tend to give up, right, frustrated. So if you ask me, a person who's well motivated, a person who's got high level of perseverance are the one that will manage to secure a good place in medical school. So talking about if you have volunteered in a social place or elsewhere, might get you good experience though.
There are doctors who are rich, who live in big bungalows and drive luxurious cars, but not all of them. See, the thing is, back in the day, during the early 70s, 80s, during the 90s, there weren't that many doctors around. So generally doctors were more successful. Yeah, you had a lot of doctors living in big bungalows and driving luxurious cars. But the thing is, now in the current world, in the current state of affairs, we are in a setting whereby we have generally many doctors. We have quite too many doctors in our country, to an extent that the young fresh graduates, some of them have to even wait up to 1 or 2 years to get a job. So as you know, when there are more doctors around, definitely the scope and the importance and the demand is going to be much less. So I wouldn't say the importance, but the scope and the demand wouldn't be as much as when doctors were more scarce. So no, I would disagree with the fact that a newly fresh graduate doctors today would end up living in big bungalows and luxurious cars. Maybe a small proportion of them, but not the majority. Well, I would say yes and no. There are the doctors. There are a few doctors out there who have been forced. We can see, when we are working, we can see some doctors being more passionate, being more interested in their field and in their work, and we can see some who have. It shows that they've been sort of forced into this field. So I would say, among all the doctors today, half of them are most likely forced. I wouldn't say forced, but persuaded. They were convinced by their parents to take up this field. No, that's not true. That's absolutely not true. The thing is, medicine is an ever-evolving field. There are many new research studies being carried out, new things being discovered in the field of medicine. So that is why doctors have to always be updated. And an update for a doctor is actually studying and sitting for an exam and all over again and being certified to do a particular specific medical service or a medical procedure, for example. And even once a doctor becomes a specialist or a consultant, they will still have to go for conferences every couple of months to generally update themselves on the new discoveries. So the learning of a doctor never ends. Actually, you learn till the last day you work as a doctor.
Like personally, I did matriculation, and all in those pre-university, definitely you have to take these subjects like biology, chemistry, physics, and mathematics, because all these four are very correlated and are very important subjects for further studying in medical school. Personally, I want to share my own experience. I was in a matriculation in Johor. We have 2 semesters, right? Everyone knows about it. The first semester, yes, I scored a 4 flat in all those 4 subjects. But the second semester, unfortunately, I did not score a 4 flat. But I still managed to get into medical school. Why so? Because I was personally not a 4 flat student, but I managed to get into USM for their medical school because they don't only focus on your subjects, on your education alone. They also want to know all your personal skills, your extracurricular activity, activeness, and also on. These are the supporting factors that helped me into entering medical school. If you're a debater, go for debating. That's also an extracurricular activities. Public speaking, get yourself experience, get yourself more involved in it, but definitely do not neglect your studies, because your studies is also very much equally important. So in an interview, this basic 3 things is very important: a little knowledge of the medical school journey, and then your good results of curriculum and extracurricular activities, and the third is your presence of mind. It's very much correlated with a doctor. A doctor definitely needs a good presence of mind. What I mean by presence of mind is, for instance, a patient who is bleeding on their head and hand is coming to you. What do you treat first? How do you treat the patient first? That is what is your presence of mind. So during an interview, the basic criteria they will check on you is your presence of mind. So when a patient comes with bleeding head and hand, which one I should treat first? Definitely the head, because you have to secure your brain, your very important organ. So that is how your presence of mind should work. After SPM and after matriculation or after your pre-U, you'll have some break for a few months, about 4 months or 5 months, right? During that period, you can go for attachment in hospitals. Those attachment means like you just go witness what is happening in the hospital. You will be appointed with a doctor who is like having their daily routine in the hospital. You can follow them to ward rounds, you can follow them for their operation theatre, and whatever activities they have in the whole day of the routine in the hospital. That is what called attachment. You can apply for attachment in all those public university hospitals like PPUKM, HUSM, and also PPUM for attachment. Usually, if you're really interested, the hospital will consider your attachment application and they will allow you for doing your attachment. Personally, I seek help from my cousin sister who's currently pursuing in medical but in different university, and also my family friend who is already a doctor. So these 2 people actually helped me advising about medical school, and they gave me the actual picture and scenario how the medical school will be. So all those advice from them helped me to be prepared mentally before entering medical school.
There are lots of way to look at it. A lot of people think that if you have been to a medical school, you should only graduate as a doctor. I would like to debunk that, because personally, me myself, I didn't end up being a doctor throughout. Meanwhile, after working for some time, I decided to explore the teaching world, and I'm still doing both. So I feel that it all depends on you as an individual. If you're a person who has got more to yourself, that means it's not just, okay, this is what I studied and this is what I'm going to do, but you're very versatile. Medical studies or medical school should not put a stop to that. You can still explore your creativity or your other phases of life despite being a doctor. So if you ask me, there are many opportunities. One of it very close to heart is lecturing, teaching, right? So it's something that we have studied. We can even teach science subjects, right? Because that's our foundation, basic. And I've also came across a few of them who are very good in IT. So they also tend to lecture. Being a doctor, they still lecture part-time in IT subjects. So I guess it all depends on the individual. I'll definitely say it's a blend of both. It can never be only one, because theory is something that sometimes comes in abundance. You might just get overwhelmed. So you need to put the theory into perspective. So what do? Practical. So only then you know, oh, this is what I studied, or this is how it's supposed to be. Simple example, when we studied how to insert a granula into a patient, we realized that theory was much easier, right? And everything goes very systematic. But then in real life, it's not like that, right? So, and there are patients where their veins are not bulging, some of them are extremely muscular, that you find it very difficult to set the line. So there could be a lot of hurdles when you come to the real life. So if you ask me, it has to be the blend of both. It will boost their motivation and self-confidence to do well in medical school. But that alone, to secure a place, I don't think so. Because it's still work, which is very good. But at the same time, in order to secure a place, academic performance is what is always being looked at. But all these definitely will help shape, mold the person to become much resilient throughout their journey in medical school. So if they've been in the social field, volunteering themselves, right, they would definitely know how tough things are, how is the doctor's life. So that will probably give them a picture whether to sail through, or perhaps they, can choose to opt out. Okay, I don't think so. This is my cup of tea or coffee. I rather want to opt out.
Yes. So the course which we take up as a medical student is called Bachelor of Medicine, or also known as, or it could be the American program known as Doctor of Medicine. In this course, every medical student has to basically go through every general field in medicine. For example, medical field, surgical field, and then in those fields you have subfields. So there's probably about 15 to 20 different fields you have to do in total. And of course, you don't do it to an extent of a specialist, you learn it to an extent of a student. And only having passed through out of all these little fields in that 5 years, only then you graduate as a doctor. So the practice I'm in right now is just one of those fields. But the thing is, in medicine, every field is connected. So every field is important. If you do not know any one of the medical fields, it can impair your judgment as a doctor. So yeah, a lot of other fields, basically every field, cardiology, nephrology, there's every part of the human body, there's a field for it. I would say they're both equally important. Having studied those courses in university is the reason why I could understand how to gather the experience when I was working. So they are both equally important and they're both equally reliant. So having studied well but not without experience is not as good as having the experience. And having experience without studying well in your course is also not good. So they're both equally important. There's not one that's more important. I think they're both very important.
The first thing which was most affecting me was my sleep time, because I had to change my sleep time. I'm a person who studies at night, so I will sleep during the afternoon or evening after my classes, so that I can stay up awake throughout the whole night to study. And definitely I need to compromise with my sleep time, where I used to sleep about 10 hours when I was back at home. Now I have to sleep like 5 hours, 6 hours. So that is a major difference. You have to manage your time properly. Social life over for me is not so affected, but I would say slightly affected, because you tend to be a lot in campus studying and going with extracurricular activities. But I do still have social time with my circle of friends. We go for dinner together, so that's only a good social time. You talk to people, you get good laugh, good entertainment?
Well, it has made me to reminisce my past as a student. So that's the part that I love the most, because when I was a student, I had my own set of aspirations. So I've realized that there are different parts to myself that I can actually bring out the creativity that was long lost, and find easy and interesting ways to conduct the lectures. So whenever I teach my students, I used to tell them stories about my experience or how we can relate this theory to real life. Besides that, it has not impinged my personal life in a bad way. I realize that I'm much carefree, and I feel much younger right now and vibrant because I'm joining that group of people. So I get to learn a lot of new things from them too.
Working as a doctor has definitely affected those aspects of my life in, I would say, not a very good way. Because when you work as a doctor, you basically have, this is what a lot of young doctors say, you've got no time for yourself, you've got no social life, your sleep cycle will be impaired because you 2 to 3 days in a week you can't sleep the whole night. So that itself definitely impairs your sleep cycle. What a typical day would be like for a fresh doctor, right? So basically you got to be in the hospital at 6 a.m. the latest as a houseman. So you get up from sleep at about 5 a.m. and at 6 a.m. when you go to work, you don't have time to go and sit down and have breakfast or have a cup of tea. None of that. You gotta have your breakfast, be ready to not to work and not eat until you don't know, because you don't know if you're gonna get a lunch break or not. So your day starts at 6 a.m. and let's just say you're on call on the day. You have to work that whole day right up to the next day till 5 or 6 p.m. That's almost a 36-37 hour shift. So once you're done with that and you come back home, all you can do is sleep. So that day might be a day where you have a birthday party to attend or you have friends calling you out. So see, social life is affected there. You can't do anything, you gotta sleep. And once you've gone to sleep and waken up the next day, you've woken up, you're back to work again, 6 a.m. again. It takes up a lot of your time, your energy, and your peace also. Because not only you have to work, but every 1 to 2 months there will be assessments, there will be tests to see whether you're competent as a doctor. So all these things tend to add up. Your time management should improve because it's going to stress you out. But in those 3 other things, generally, if you don't work on it, they all will deteriorate. Your health, your social life will deteriorate if you don't work on it.
I think the reality in Malaysia, if you want to be a doctor, is we have to get to know first how is the future of medicine in Malaysia. So if you see now, for these past few years, we have got surplus of doctors and very few intake into the government sector. First of all, once you finish your medical school, you have to do housemanship. So even that takes a very long time. So I guess students who aspire to be a doctor in the future have to look at this reality first.
If your heart says you can be a doctor, go for it. If you are half 50-50, take your time and think, go explore more about the field and get knowledge, get people's advice who are already doctors. Don't listen to those who are not doctors.
And then they should make a decision. They should also definitely talk to their parents. Going into a medical school should be an informed choice.
Medical school cannot be successful if you are being forced.
I noticed that for those students who are not so passionate about taking up medicine, who only want to take it up for the quality of life they think they would get out of it.
Being a doctor is not a glamorous job, it's a very responsible job.
It's mainly, if you ask me, it's service to humanity. But then that service is, you've got to put yourself later. So this comes first. When they get a job, will they like that life or not? Where they have to be, on call perhaps more than 24 hours.
Actually, they end up being disappointed in the end because there's just too much of sacrifice and too much of hard work involved in this field. Whereas those students who are really passionate about medicine, meaning they feel very satisfied and content after treating a patient, after seeing a patient, and that itself is enough for them to be happy. And those type of students are happier as doctors.